Hello again, audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and today we're going to have a little bit of fun because we have a focal shootout where I have the Clear MG, which I'll just go ahead and stick right here for a moment. I have the Radiance, which I reviewed a little while ago, and so I will put a link to that below. And then also a new review, the Stellia, okay, which I will put a link to my review for that down below as well. So this is 3 models, and I have also heard, it's been a while now, but the Focal Elegia was one of my earliest written reviews, so I will put a link to that down below as well so that you can see my thoughts on that one. And so I thought I'd just give a few thoughts on the Focal line, at least the ones that I have heard, and do some quick compare and contrast on these things. So the Radiance is a limited edition. It's getting a little bit harder to find now, but there are still a few of them floating around out there new. It is $1,290 US dollars, brand new. And there will be some on the used market. On my head is the Clear MG, which is $1,490 US dollars, and then the Stellia comes in at $2,990 US dollars right there as a new price. Again, all of these do pop up on the used market with some frequency and significantly reduced prices if you're looking for one there. So, oh, and I should say, since I did mention the Elegia, like that one, every once in a while you'll still see Adorama.com drop those things to like $400, and that is quite a deal if you happen to get one of those. All right, so even though the Elegia is a discontinued model, it can be a really good deal if you find one of those. So just some general thoughts on like the Focal line. Like you can see, just they're all built very similarly. Okay? And they all have a unique focal, like definite focal aesthetic. But they are all well built. They vary in color and a little bit in cup styling and all of that. I'll take these off here too. Like they all vary a little bit in their cup styling and in the materials used in the build, but they are definitely all sibling models in that regard. Like they are just high attention to detail in the build of all of these. They are all comfortable. They all strike a great balance in clamp strength so that they stay on the head well. You can like look down at your desktop all day long if you want, and they're not even that heavy, so you don't really get a whole lot of crick in the neck going on either when you look down. So I mean, fit, finish, build quality on these things, they're all great. Sonically, they all also have some similar traits because again, they are the same company. Like the Focal house sound means a couple of things. For one, they are all very dynamic. Like I mentioned, I think in every review of these, and when I get around to the full review of these, it will be the same thing. Like they all punch, right? They all have pretty good bass extension. They vary in frequency response in terms of the presence of the bass, but they all have pretty good bass extension, and they will all punch you. Like they are very macro dynamic. They have high dynamic range. They are aggressive on the attack. They hit. Okay, they all do that. Like Stellia and Radiance probably hit the hardest of the 3 that are on my head. I don't really remember Elegia all that well, other than that it was punchy among the headphones that I owned at the time. So if you look at my written review, it'll give you some insight into which ones I was comparing that one to. Now, the closed back models, the Radiance, the Stellia, the Elegia, and I've been told the Celesti, which I have not heard, does the same thing. Like, they all isolate really well, too. They hold sound out really well, they don't leak very much, and so they are very good for being on the go, on your head, moving around. In fact, they isolate and hold sound out and also in about as well as any headphone that I've heard that's not an active noise canceller. Like that's a really impressive feature for them. Now the Clear MG being an open back, that's just not really a concern because it is open, so sound goes in and out as one would expect. Okay, in that regard. Now the Radiance, back to that Focal house sound for a moment. Like, this one is the oddball tuning from what I have heard, because the Elegia, this Clear MG, and the Stellia are all a bit mid-forward in their presentation and in their frequency response. And that works against them a little bit because they are a little bit too mid-forward for me, and there is some bite in the upper mids, lower treble, and then there's also some shoutiness and honkiness and hollowness, all that. And that clearly, again, 3 out of the 4 models from Focal that I've heard are all like that. So it's clearly an aspect of the house sound that Focal is going for. They just are mid-forward in signature, and that either works for you or it doesn't. It is a little bit of a drawback for me. The Radiance is different in that this one has a bass shelf. It has an elevated low end to it. And it's also a little bit more smooth and relaxed through the upper mids, lower treble. And so I think of the Focals that I've heard, this one has the most natural timbre of any of the Focals through that mid-range and lower treble region, where it just sounds the most natural. Voices sound the most natural. Pianos, guitars, horned instruments, stringed instruments, things of that nature just sound the most like real-life pianos, guitars, horned instruments, string instruments, just like they would sound in real life if you were in a live recording or in a live situation with those things. All right, so I would give this one the win on timbre. The Stellia, definitely the most resolving of all of them. It's subtle in its resolution. It's not quite as aggressive. I remember the Elegia being a little bit detail forward and aggressive for its price point. Stellia is a little bit more relaxed in how it presents that detail, but it's still very highly resolving and pulls a lot out of the music. Okay, so I would say in terms of the resolution of these 3, Stellia is first by a somewhat comfortable margin. These 2, the Radiance and then on my head here, the Clear MG, are pretty close to each other, but I think I would actually give the edge to this one, believe it or not. Okay, but they all are good in in resolution, and MG is a little bit more detail forward than Radiance, because again, this one is more about being smoothed and relaxed. But yeah. If you're looking for the top resolution, I mean, the most expensive one, not surprising, is the best resolver. You're the one with the highest resolution there. So, yeah, what else? Staging gets interesting, because another aspect of Focal House sound, or the Focal House sound, is the way they stage. They don't really put the music out in front of the listener so much. They put you in the performance. Like the sound stage almost wraps around the head and puts you in this bubble. The only other company that I can think of that stages that way in their headphones would be Odyssey. So if you've heard Odysseys but not Focals, the staging between Focal and Odyssey is quite similar. Just it wraps around the head. So I've described this in written form and in some of my other videos where if you're at a symphony performance, Focals make it sound like you're standing on the maestro stand, and then the instruments are all in kind of this U shape around you, and even wrap around behind you a little bit. Whereas the staging of a Hi-Fi Man or a Beyerdynamic or many other well-known headphone companies is that you're back in the audience a little bit, in the 3rd or 4th row, and everything is more happening out in front of you. So it's neither good nor bad on the staging with Focals. It's just different, so that's a preference thing. They all have pretty good imaging and separation within that sound field, though. They place sonic images pretty well and give some good space between the sonic images. Stellia is the best at that, which shouldn't be surprising. I think Radiance might be a little bit better than MG on the positive aspects, and I'll say in the imaging, in terms of placing the image where it's supposed to be, but I would give the edge to MG over Radiance in terms of separating sonic images and creating the negative, the space in between sonic images. I think MG, is a little bit stronger than Radiance on this in that regard. So comparing those two things. Now, I did most of this test on 2 signal chains. I have a Chord Hugo 2 transportable DAC amp, and all of these 3, I did not have Elegia when I had Hugo 2, but of these 3, they all sounded pretty good on the Hugo 2. And the Hugo 2 is a bit headphone picky. You got to be careful what you match that one with. But all of these 3 worked pretty well. I think this one, the Radiance, likes the Hugo the most because it's a little bit more relaxed and the Hugo is a little bit more detail forward. So they balance each other out and complement each other well. I think the Hugo 2 accentuates the mid-forwardness of these two a little bit more than some other signal chains will. So that shoutiness, honkiness, that mid-range bite is a little stronger on that one than on some others. In fact, while it's still good, I did not really like the Clear MG on the Hugo 2 much at all and thought very much that it was like almost a distant third in terms of my overall preference of these three. However, when I moved down here to the basement again, where I have a Berkeley Alpha S2 DAC and a Vioelectric HPA V281 head amp, I thought the MG woke up the most. Like, this one might be the most amp picky of the focals that I've have, or at least these three that are here. So I think the most care probably should be given, or the most care for amp pairings should be given to the Clear MG of these three. All three of these, the MG, the Stellia, and the Radiance, sounded better on the Berkeley and the Vio, which is not surprising, seeing as how that chain, when you add it all together, like that's like 3, maybe almost 4 times the price of the Hugo 2, so it's not that surprising. They all sound good, but I think the MG benefited the most of the three and really closed the gap on the other two in terms of my preference, although I still think, you know, I'm going to go with my own personal preference just because of tuning and all of that, and just the lushness of the timbre. All of that is I will give the edge to the Radiance on that, and I think that also makes this one the best value of the three because, one, it's the cheapest, and then it does, I think, more of the essential things either very well or right than the others. However, I can definitely see why many would prefer the Stellia because the staging and the imaging and the separation and the overall resolution and all of that, really good on this. Okay, I have spent the least time with the MG, so it is still an excellent headphone. I'm not giving up on it yet. I need to do the full review on it and give it a little bit more listening, but it is not appealing to me personally as much as these other two yet. So I need to dig into why that is. So do stay tuned for the more complete review on that. Now, I apologize if this is redundant because I kind of make these up as I go. But another thing is, like, all of these headphones are really super easy to drive. They are all right about 35 ohm impedance. They have high efficiency. You can run them off of just about any amp that puts out, or any amp like DAPs and all of that. They do really well on. So there we go. There are some thoughts. There's more that I could say. So I hope I may not be able to answer everyone's questions specifically, but I think those are generally the highlights of these. So my own personal preference would be the one that, I mean, I own this one, so I probably am a little bit biased, but I love the bass shelf on this. I love its natural timbre, and it is resolving enough for me that it connects me to the music well. However, I do recognize that this one is very much technically superior in just about every way save the timbre over the Radiance. And I'm still working on the MG. Like, I haven't given up on it yet. Like, there are definitely some good strengths here. Like, it has the physical punch that Focal is known for. It has pretty good separation in its spatial presentation. You know, probably a little better than Radiance on that. Not quite up to the Stellia. And then, of course, this one is open back, so it's a little bit different in its presentation that way as well. So, here we go. There's kind of a Focal shootout for you, and I will leave it there. So I am Wave Theory. I have been doing written reviews of sound gear on Hi-Fi Guides Forum and Head5 for a little over a year, so I will put the links to my written work down below. And otherwise, please like and subscribe to my channel. And until next time, enjoy the music.